A rivalry born in rage. A friendship buried under decades of silence. And now, an unexpected confession. James Hetfield has just opened a door fans never thought he'd touch again. His complicated, emotional history with Dave Mustaine and his band Megadeth. We all know the headlines, fights, firings, and decades of bitterness. But what really happened behind the guitars, the fame, and the music? Why now? Why speak up at 61? And what does he truly think about the man who helped build Metallica, then turned into its fiercest rival? We dug through interviews, confessions, and lost chances to unpack this long-running feud, one that changed the course of heavy metal forever. Firestarter in the studio in 1981, fate collided with ambition when four young musicians crossed paths, unaware they were about to redefine the very essence of metal. James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, two driven kids from California with an insatiable hunger for sound, had just started molding what would become Metallica. But they needed something or someone to electrify their chemistry. That's when Dave Mustaine entered the picture. A lightning rod of raw talent and unchecked aggression, Mustaine wasn't just another guitarist. He was a storm in human form, a musician who played with fury and lived with even more. From day one, Mustaine's influence on Metallica was impossible to ignore. His guitar work was jagged, sharp, and deeply emotional. It brought menace, chaos, and edge to songs like The Four Horsemen and Jump in the Fire. Many fans don't realize just how much of early Metallica's DNA carried his fingerprints. Without Dave's relentless energy, those tracks might have lacked the searing force that helped ignite the thrash metal movement. But genius has its price. Mustaine's brilliance came wrapped in volatility. His drinking spiraled out of control. He picked fights, clashed with crew members, and disrupted rehearsals with unpredictable outbursts. Even in moments of triumph, tension was thick. The band admired his skills, but feared his temper. It wasn't just music they were making. They were living in a pressure cooker. One telling moment laid it bare. When Mustaine's dog damaged bassist Ron McGovney's car, tempers exploded. Hetfield, always fiercely loyal to the group, confronted Mustaine, and in a drunken rage, Dave responded with violence. The punch he threw that night may have sealed his fate. It wasn't just about the dog, it was about control, trust, and a band on the verge of collapse. Behind the scenes, Hetfield and Ulrich wrestled with a decision they never wanted to make. They needed Mustaine's fire, but they feared it would burn the whole project down. And so, just days before Metallica was set to enter the studio for their debut album Kill 'Em All, they made the call. They fired him. No discussion. No warning. They put Mustaine on a Greyhound bus back to Los Angeles with nothing but his gear and a hard goodbye. The impact was devastating. It was the biggest betrayal of my life, Mustaine later said. I helped start that band. I poured everything into it, and they tossed me out like garbage. The pain didn't fade with time. It festered, fueling a decades-long rivalry that shaped both men's careers. Hetfield later acknowledged the guilt. We were all wild back then, he said, but Dave took it further than we could handle. We did what we had to do, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt. In Hetfield's mind, it wasn't just a band decision. It was the loss of a brother. And yet, Mustaine didn't disappear. He transformed. From the ashes of rejection, he built Megadeth, a band crafted not just to succeed, but to eclipse Metallica. Every riff he wrote, every lyric he screamed, was a declaration of war. Metallica had tried to silence him, but instead, they created a rival who would become their mirror, their shadow, and their fiercest challenger. The fire they lit together didn't just burn bridges, it ignited something far more powerful. Dave Mustaine wasn't walking away defeated. He was gearing up for a war of his own. Forged in fury, Dave Mustaine didn't walk away from Metallica. He was cast out, bruised in ego and spirit. And as the bus rolled back toward Los Angeles in 1983, Mustaine wasn't just staring out the window. He was planning revenge. In those long hours of isolation, a new mission took shape in his mind. Not just to form another band, but to build something so powerful it would haunt the very people who had exiled him. That mission would become Megadeth. This wasn't a clean slate. It was war. Mustaine wasn't creating from peace. He was creating from rage. Everything he felt, betrayal, humiliation, anger was funneled into his songwriting. And in just 2 years, that fury erupted onto the world in the form of Killing Is My Business. And Business is good. Released in 1985, it was chaotic, intense, and technically brutal. It didn't sound like a debut. It sounded like a threat. One track in particular, Mechanics, stood out. Fast, ferocious, and unapologetic, it was a reworked version of Metallica's The Four Horsemen, a song Mustaine had co-written. By rebranding it under his name and speeding it up, he was sending a message. This was mine all along. But Mustaine wasn't just shouting at Metallica. He was reshaping metal. Unlike Metallica, who by then were moving toward a broader audience, Megadeth doubled down on complexity. Intricate guitar work, whiplash, tempo, changes, aggressive vocals. Mustaine wasn't just trying to match Metallica's energy. He was trying to surpass it in every measurable way. He didn't want to be compared. He wanted to be crowned. The divide between the two bands widened quickly. Metallica began gaining mainstream traction, particularly after the success of Ride the Lightning and Master Puppets. They were praised for evolving their sound, adding melody, structure, even moments of vulnerability. Megadeth, on the other hand, remained firmly in the trenches of pure thrash. And that divide became a kind of spiritual battleground for fans. Metallica was the band that matured. Megadeth was the band that refused to compromise. Interview after interview, Mustaine poured gasoline on the fire. He called Metallica sellouts, mocked their lyrics, accused them of coasting on fame. And his fans, many of them musicians themselves, loved him for it. He was the anti-hero, the guy who had been wronged and came back swinging. Mustaine's identity became inseparable from that bitterness. And for better or worse, it gave his music its edge. Behind the scenes, Hetfield and Ulrich paid attention, even if they rarely admitted it. They listened to Megadeth albums. They saw the headlines. They heard the venom. Hetfield later confessed, "We knew Dave was out there. We could feel it. And yeah, it made us work harder." But where Mustaine externalized his pain, Hetfield internalized his. His answer wasn't confrontation. It was elevation. He focused on making Metallica so great that no feud could overshadow it. Still, the shadow lingered. No matter how many albums Metallica sold, no matter how big their tours got, Mustaine was there, snarling in interviews, pushing technical boundaries, always reminding the world that he had been part of the foundation. And for many fans, that unfiltered aggression was what made Megadeth real. By the late 1980s, Megadeth had become more than Mustaine's revenge project. It was a legitimate force in metal. Albums like Peace Sells, But Who's Buying? And So Far, So Good. So What? Weren't just commercial successes, they were artistic statements. Mustaine had gone from exiled guitarist to visionary frontman. But that rise didn't bring peace. If anything, it deepened the wound. Because even as Megadeth climbed higher, the world still compared him to Metallica. And that comparison, fair or not, kept the rivalry burning. But while Mustaine roared through every solo with vengeance, Hetfield responded with something quieter, more enduring. His answer wasn't in interviews or insults, but in the way Metallica evolved. The quiet fuel behind Metallica, while Dave Mustaine screamed his frustrations into every mic and riffed his pain into every record, James Hetfield said almost nothing. At least, not out loud. He didn't volley verbal jabs in interviews or air his emotions publicly. But behind the stoic facade was a man grinding harder, writing deeper, and channeling every ounce of that unspoken rivalry into Metallica's rise. In his silence, Hetfield found power and purpose. Mustaine had been a force of nature in Metallica's early days. His departure left a hole, but it also created a space Hetfield could finally fill. With Kirk Hammett replacing Mustaine on lead guitar, Hetfield stepped up, not just as frontman, but as the emotional engine of the band. He carried the guilt of Mustaine's firing, the pressure of living up to the potential they had lost, and the hunger to prove Metallica had made the right choice. Their next move was critical, and Ride the Lightning delivered. Released in 1984, it marked a dramatic leap forward. The riffs were sharper, the compositions tighter, the themes darker. This wasn't just thrash, it was evolution. Hetfield's songwriting had matured, digging into existential fears and societal disillusionment. The band wasn't reacting to Mustaine's attacks, they were outrunning them. But that didn't mean Hetfield was untouched by the noise. In later interviews, he admitted the competition never fully left his mind. "We knew Dave was always watching," he said. "And in a weird way, that pushed us. We didn't want to fall behind. We couldn't. This wasn't about keeping up, it was about staying ahead." Master of Puppets in 1986 was their declaration of dominance. Widely regarded as one of the greatest metal albums of all time, it was Hetfield's masterpiece. With tracks like Battery, Welcome Home, Sanitarium, and the title track, the album balanced brutality with complexity. It proved that Metallica wasn't just surviving without Mustaine, they were thriving. Still, comparisons followed them. Hardcore fans dissected solos, credits, and riffs, always trying to determine whose vision had truly driven early Metallica. The name Mustaine lingered in forums, articles, and debates. And while Mustaine fed into the rivalry publicly, Hetfield stayed quiet. He didn't need to justify Metallica's decisions. He let the music speak. But inside, Hetfield was never quite at peace. He later said that Mustaine's ceaseless presence in the press wore on him. "It's hard when someone won't let go of the past," Hetfield once confessed, "especially when you're trying to move forward." That statement said out loud what many fans had long suspected. Hetfield hadn't buried the past, he'd buried it alive. Throughout the late 1980s and early 90s, Metallica grew their sound. They welcomed melody. They penned ballads like Fade to Black and Nothing Else Matters. They infuriated purists but reached millions. And Justice for All revealed their grand musical designs, while the Black Album took them global. The detractors decried a sellout. Mustaine certainly did. Yet Hetfield wasn't chasing fashion. He was chasing eternity. In doing so, he was creating a legacy that reached far beyond the thrash genre. He didn't just want to be better than Mustaine. He wanted Metallica to be untouchable. Offstage, Hetfield struggled with more than just music. His demons of addiction, self-doubt, and success added new gravity to his quiet stare. He only rarely lashed out, but when he created songs such as The God That Failed or The Unforgiven, one could feel the pain still unresolved in every chord. That pain, part of which was rooted in the Metallica Megadeth fracture, would ever totally go away. Instead, it would become fuel. Not for rivalries, though. For building. Hetfield's refusal to confront Mustaine straight up was not weakness. It was concentration. He was too busy crafting albums, breaking records, and shaping history. For several years, Hetfield uttered not a word, but silence can speak volumes. When the two men finally sat down across from each other, the past came crashing into the room. The conversation that cut deep by the early 2000s, both Metallica and Megadeth had become institutions in heavy metal. Their catalogs were vast, their influence unmatched, and their respective fan bases deeply loyal. Yet even with their status as legends, it seemed something remained unfinished, something both bands had long avoided. The emotional wreckage left behind in the aftermath of Dave Mustaine's exit from Metallica. That pain, buried for decades beneath platinum records and sold-out tours, finally surfaced at a moment neither fans nor the artists could have anticipated. In 2004, Metallica released Some Kind of Monster, a raw, behind-the-scenes documentary chronicling their inner turmoil during the making of the Saint Anger album. It was supposed to be showcasing the band's struggle with identity, addiction, and reinvention. But in the middle of that chaos came a surprise nobody could have expected: a sit-down between James Hetfield and Dave Mustaine. For the first time since 1983, they were face-to-face, alone in a room, cameras rolling. The footage is unforgettable. Mustaine, once the aggressive, defiant voice in interviews, appeared vulnerable. Gone was the bravado. In its place was a man still nursing wounds left by a firing that took everything from him. He told Hetfield plainly, "You never even said thank you. It's like you just threw me away." There was no performance in his voice, just decades of unspoken grief. Hetfield sat across from him, visibly uneasy, but listening. He wasn't defensive. He didn't justify or deny. Instead, he explained, "At the time, we were just trying to survive." He recalled the early chaos, the illegal substances, the drinking, the volatile personalities, and admitted letting Mustaine go wasn't personal. It was survival, but there was something in his tone that went beyond logic. It was remorse. This was no staged reconciliation. It was two men confronting a shared history that neither had ever really come to terms with. To Mustaine, it was about respect, about dignity, about being erased from a legacy he helped build. For Hetfield, it was about guilt, about a decision made in youth that had haunted his silence ever since. The conversation didn't end with hugs or forgiveness. In fact, it left more questions than answers, but it shattered a barrier.